Today's show going to be really a blast. As usual, as I say all the time, I get so excited with my guests, especially new guests. And the story of how I found our guest today is it's one of these surreal, serendipitous moments that my life is all about, this universal energy thing. Rich Martini will be with us. I'm going to title this show Flipside, the story of Rich Martini, because there's such a vast story here with Rich. It's just crazy cool, and it's going to be really fun. So let me do a quick bio, because I want to get Rich in here and have him just take over, because he's going to ask me questions too. He's going to interview me, and I'm going to interview him. We're going to have a blast. Author and award-winning filmmaker Rich Martini has written and or directed 9 indie films. A former freelance journalist for Variety, Inc., Premiere, other magazines, graduate of the Masters of Professional Writing program at USC. Congrats on that. Flipside, a tourist guide to the afterlife, is his debut nonfiction book on a topic that's been haunting him since the death of a soulmate. We're going to talk about that. If you go to Rich's YouTube channel, we'll talk about all this stuff here throughout the show, everybody, because we've got Rich for the whole hour. All of this stuff is very, very interesting, very different, and it's just not only does Rich have his vast career of transitional things that he's done, but it's just such a, it's just a great topic. I love this stuff. After a dream vision of visiting his friend in the great beyond, and I'm serious here, in the great beyond, Rich went on a literary quest to find out what the prevailing science and philosophical opinions on the afterlife are. Liking that so far? Now I got your attention, don't I? He journeyed into the Tibetan philosophy, made documentaries in Tibet and India, and eventually was introduced to the work of Newton Institute, founded by renowned author and hypnotherapist Dr. Michael Newton. And he had that on his film, which I just did rent the film, and I'm going to be watching that shortly with Sandy, probably later this evening. I want to get to the radio program. I could go longer on Rich's bio, but I'm not going to. I just want to let him talk about himself, his early life, the story of Rich Martini. Flipside, the story of Rich Martini. I want to welcome to the Boomers Rock Show for the first time, Rich Martini. Rich, welcome to the show, buddy.
Hi, Tom. How you doing, man? Well, enough about me. What do you think of me?
I think, so I got to tell everybody how this whole thing, this serendipitous law of attraction happened for me. I think Rich is just phenomenal. I think what he's doing and the way he comes across on radio, I wake up at 4:30 in the morning every day to go to the gym. So I wake up to Coast, the radio program, George Norrie's radio program. It's a great show. And he talks about all kinds of spirituality and afterlife stuff. And that's where I heard this guy on this radio show, and it was just, I immediately had my pad. I have a pad of paper next to my clock radio, and I wrote down, half asleep. This is a true story, everybody. Half asleep, this guy, this Rich Martini. I'm like, who is this guy? This is really interesting stuff. So I just immediately got it, sent him a note. We worked some stuff out, and voila, here we are. I bought his book, Flipside, read it. It's a phenomenal read. It's really fun. He's a very cool guy. So I just think you're a cool guy, Rich, and I welcome you to the radio program.
Tom, I so appreciate that. Wow, I should just have you go around and introduce me everywhere I go.
I would be glad to do that.
Burger King, and Tom is just going to tell you a little bit about me before I order my burger. No, it's funny. I was just in Michigan not too long ago, and I was driving down Route 94. I know you're in Michigan, and I know your audience is in the Midwest, but around the world, of course. But driving through Michigan, it's a very unusual place because on one side of the road, billboards everywhere. On one side of the road are these billboards that say, Jesus will save you. God is behind you. God's here. And the other side of the road, it says strip club up ahead, turn left. And you've got the devil and the angel, on one side of your shoulder on both sides of the road as you're driving through Michigan. Is that true?
It's very true. It's absolutely true. We have casinos everywhere now. It's just like,
I know.
Go ahead.
No, I love it. It's really fascinating and really cool. Well, as you mentioned, it's such an odd thing to tell people that, this is what you're into or this is what you're doing, especially in my field. I'm a filmmaker. But somewhere along the line, a friend of mine passed away and started visiting me in dreams. A lot of people have dreams about loved ones who died, passed on. But in this case, she was offering me new information, stuff I didn't know. And I started thinking to myself, well, how can she was appearing as younger than I knew her. And how could these, things be happening? Okay. And so ultimately it took me a long time to get around to it, but I found Michael Newton's work. And in his work, I was reading what she had been telling me. Okay. So I thought, oh, this is a fascinating topic for a movie and being a film guy. And the way cameras are now, you can just, take a camera anywhere and start a documentary. So I contacted the Newton Institute in wherever they are. They're back east. And I said, I'd like to make a documentary about Michael Newton. And they said, well, he's retired. So, and I thought, well, that's the end of that. And then they said, however, we're doing a conference in Chicago. So if you want to come and film our conference, you can do that. So I thought, oh, okay, great. And it happened to be, I'm from Northbrook, which is outside of Chicago. It happened to be, I think, in Schaumburg. So I thought, well, great opportunity, stop and see the folks and do this research. So, and also I was surprised because, when people are doing a workshop, it's a proprietary thing. This training that Michael Newton had worked on for 30 years of his career, like how to do a between-life hypnotherapy session. It's like 4 to 6 hours. And here they were inviting me into their inner sanctum, to do this. I thought, well, that's kind of unusual. So when I got there, they told me, Michael's not doing interviews anymore. But I met him, and after a few minutes, he said, all right, I'm going to give you my last interview. Now, he didn't die for another 10 years, but this was his last interview. So I filmed him for about, maybe 2 or 3 hours, and I had read all his books just to prep for the interview. Not entirely, I'm not a crazy person. I'm a skeptical filmmaker, jaded Hollywood guy. Not entirely believing everything he was saying, which was basically, over 30 years, he had 7,000 people say the same things about the journey into the afterlife.
7,000.
Sorry?
7,000.
7,000. So just in the face of it, you'd go, well, wait a minute. What? Wouldn't there be people saying the opposite? Anyway. So, but here I'm interviewing him, and then I interviewed his wife, who happened to be there, and I thought, this is great. She can corroborate some of what he was saying, or, claim it to be opposite. I said, so what did you think when your husband, the psychologist, came home and started telling you about this between lives realm? And she said, frankly, I thought he was nuts. I thought they were going to take away his license, and haul him off in a paddy wagon. She said, until I heard the tapes. And once she heard the tapes of the people coming in, the clients coming in and talking about the flip side, as I call it, the afterlife, she knew that, this couldn't be coincidence. There's just too many people saying the same things. Right. So ultimately, I realized that she said that, I need tapes. I need to film people under deep hypnosis. So, the camera doesn't lie. You can see really quickly whether someone's directing you or, saying something that's leading you. So
right. Well, hold, Rich, because we got to go to a hard break here, and I want to come back to this story and finish this. Rich Martini is our guest today, everybody. Flipside, the story of Rich Martini. You can see where we're going with this. This is a very interesting, very different show for us. This is the Boomers Rock Radio Talk Show. We'll be right back.
This is Tom Matt's Boomers Rock Radio. Connect with our show this week. Want to send Tom an email? Send it to tom@boomersrock.us. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the radio program, everybody. You're listening to the Boomers Rock Radio Talk Show. I want to thank all the listeners and affiliates who are joining us this weekend as we're broadcasting, carrying Mr. Rich Martini, Flipside, the story of Rich Martini. Great story. We're just scratching the surface here. FM 94.9 WJHN 1370 AM in Grand Haven, West Michigan. Glad to have you guys on board. WJIM 1240 AM, Lansing, the Big Talker. WKLQ 1490 Muskegon, Michigan. WMMI 830 in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. WJRW 1340 AM in Grand Rapids, carrying us twice on the weekends. So awesome to be over there in Grand Rapids, in that big old city of Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids is happening, I'm telling you. WKAR, the big rocket at Michigan State University, PBS, WKAR 94.5 and AM 870. So happy to be on WKAR. I want to thank Craig Stiles from Deciduary Analytics for coaching me, being my friend, guiding, having breakfast with me, keeping me straight, going to meetings, doing all these good things, keeping me from talking too much. When we go to the meetings or doing the phone calls, that's Craig Stiles. He keeps me straight. I want to thank Craig. Love him so much. He's just been a wonderful guy who's been a supporter of the radio program. And I don't know where the heck we'd be without Craig. I mean, he's just a great guy. Just a great guy. So if you need to get a hold of Craig, which on the last show, I got an email like halfway through the show as I'm listening to the broadcast from a listener who wanted Craig's email, just send me an email, tom@boomersrock.us, and I will forward his email over to you. That's kind of the system that Craig and I have set up. Today's show is very special. We're talking to Rich Martini, joining us from Los Angeles. The title of this episode is Flipside. Just like his film, just like his book, which is really interesting, very, very fun to read, and just compelling as heck to just kind of dive into this thing. I've actually got the Audible and I've got the Kindle WhisperSync on it. So I love that whole feature of the Kindle where you can read it and listen to it at the same time. It's just,
cool.
it really absorb it. Yeah, it's really cool, Rich. The story of Rich Martini. So Rich, you're talking about Dr. Newton and how you scored the last interview with him, 7,000 people that he had this story from. His wife thinks he's he's a little wacky until he starts coming up with all this corroborating evidence and all these same stories. And, you started to talk about your friend. And I know that I'd like to mention her name because I did look up, is it Luana?
Yeah, Luana Anders.
Luana Anders. I looked her up and I said, I've seen her on television. She was the woman you were referring to in the first segment, correct?
That's correct. And she did 30 movies. She's an easy writer. She's the one that Peter Fonda hooks up with, an easy writer. And oddly enough, I saw that movie in whatever year it came out in Chicago. And then 20 years later, I met everybody that was in the film through her, and we met at a screenwriting class at USC. She was learning how to write, and she and I co-wrote a film called Limit Up together, which kind of came and went, but it's a lovely, lovely film. Now, here's what's really interesting, and it might be valuable for your listeners. I mean, I could tell you how Michael Newton's journey and his path was really fascinating. He was a skeptic, didn't believe in the afterlife, and then it was proven to him like time and time again, and then he realized at some point in his career that there was this between lives realm that people were talking about, okay? He calls it the between lives realm. In my research, I've filmed 45 of these sessions since my first one that I filmed of myself doing it and then all these other people doing them. In the 45 sessions that I've filmed of people that I've chosen, skeptics, sometimes atheists, doesn't matter what their religion is, when they refer to this between lives realm, they call it going home. They use the word home as in not here, not the home they grew up here, not the home they're remembering from a previous lifetime, but the home we all go to after we're here. And when you think of the word heaven, let's say, and that's usually a brain freeze word where your brain just stops and you're like, heaven, angels, okay, what's he talking about? That's religious. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about it, but I'm calling it something else, home. When you think of it as home, you and I, Tom, we came from different homes, even though we're from the Midwest, et cetera, et cetera. We have commonality, but even if we're identical twins, we have a different idea of what home is to each one of us. And what is home? It's a place of safety. It's a place of non-judgment. It's a place of, I often hear this term, unconditional love. Which is interesting because we live in a world of conditional love. If you like me, I like you. And that's get off my foot. Don't point the gun at me. But the world of unconditional love that these people talk about. So I saw this in Michael's work, and then I presented it to the University of Virginia. I showed these scientists, Dr. Grayson, a bunch of people. These are top guys in what they call post-materialist consciousness science, Department of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia. And they said, Rich, hypnosis isn't a valid science tool. We don't consider it valid. I said, well, what do you consider valid? I mean, other than the fact that thousands of people across the globe are saying the same things. I mean, that's data. But ultimately, we started talking about near-death experiences. So my next book, which is called It's a Wonderful Afterlife, there's 2 volumes. I delved into and brought people who had near-death experiences and had them do a hypnosis session with a Newton-trained person and found that they would refer to the same things. So people who had near-death events, near-death experiences, were describing, not everybody, because, when you come back from a near-death event, it's very hard to use words or syntax to describe what you saw. But if you're there with a hypnotherapist, they can ask you, well, who is this person you're seeing? Do you see anybody else? That sort of thing. They had the identical events that they would describe. And so in those 2 books, I followed science. I went to scientists of consciousness and asked them, how could this be? What does this mean? And I showed how near-death events are almost identical, in many cases identical, to these between life events, or what I call going home. And I know it's controversial, but if you go to the IANDS.org, IANDS, that's the International Association for Near-Death Studies, their website, they post, I think, weekly, these accounts of people who've had near-death experiences. And if you start to read them, like let's say you read 20 of them, you'll find these common themes of experiencing unconditional love in this place. They don't refer to it as home. They might call it heaven. They might call it, this other place. But I'm telling you, it's the same place that these other people are talking about. And for your audience, when you talk about reframing, our lives or reframing the issue, if you can allow yourself to think that there is possibly, forget about believing that there is, just think there's the possibility of what I'm saying is accurate, right? That there is this home we all go to, it changes how you view the planet. Things that happen to you that are so stressful, if you realize that they may have been designed by you so you could learn a lesson from them, or the things that happened earlier in your life that were stressful and almost impossible to overcome, they're now diamonds, because once you traverse a stone that's been really difficult in your life, when you look back at it, that's the thing that made you who you are. That thing that you overcame, that you survived. Not everybody overcomes these things. Of course, we know that. But if you do overcome them, then that's something like the most difficult test you've ever taken. Once you've gone through it, the class is gone in your mind, but you accomplished something. You went to the next level.
Right. Hold that thought now, Rich, because we're coming up on break here, and I want to tell everybody who's been speaking, sharing this awesome story. Rich Martini's with us, everybody. Flipside, the story of Rich Martini. We've got a lot more to talk about here. A lot more to talk about. Even talk about my epiphany when I had my illness 10 years ago. You're listening to the Boomers Rock Radio Talk Show. We'll be right back.
This is Tom Matt's Boomers Rock Radio. Connect with our show this week. Want to send Tom an email? Send it to tom@boomersrock.us. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the Boomers Rock Radio Talk Show. I'm your host, Tom Matt. My guest today is Mr. Rich Martini, joining us from Los Angeles. Flipside, the story of Rich Martini. And we're, between break, we're having this conversation. It's like, Rich, we gotta get back on it, start recording this again, because we're burning up all this good stuff. And what I was saying to Rich is, some people must look at him sideways. And what was your answer to that, Rich?
Well, I said not really, because in my latest book, Hacking the Afterlife, I spent a lot of time warning people away from the book. I say, look, if somebody gave this to you by accident, or give it to you as a gift, get your money back, send it back. This information isn't for everybody, because you didn't sign up for a lifetime to know how the play is going to end or how the book is going to end. However, if you find yourself compelled to explore this information, as you are now, Tom, you're compelled to understand what's going on. So if that's the case, then yeah, you should check out all this other research. You should check out my research, check out everybody's research. And I tell people, look, if you don't want to spend a nickel on it, you can watch me talk about it online. Martini Prods is, my YouTube thing. But ultimately, you have to decide for yourself whether this is information that helps you, that heals you, that releases stress. Now, in your case, Tom, you mentioned epiphany that happened, I think, 2008.
Yes.
Describe that to us. What was that epiphany?
Okay, so I came down with a illness out of the blue, everybody, and I've talked about this a little bit throughout the 7 years we've been doing the radio program, but came down with bilateral pneumonia, and I thought it was the flu, and I had taken heavy doses of NyQuil for like 3 nights in a row, and Sandy, who is a medical technologist, very well-trained health professional, she would not let me take the NyQuil again for the 4th or 5th night. I was just one of these kind of like, I'm going to cure this myself, I'll be all right kind of thing. And if I would have taken that NyQuil that last night, I probably would have died, because I wound up getting 106.5 temperature that night. And they discovered that I had very severe case of bilateral pneumonia. And she rushed me to the emergency. They had no idea what was going on. They put me in isolation. They thought I had TB, and I mean, this is the room where they come in the spacesuits. Everybody, this is no kidding. Sandy was the only one, and I wrote about this in the Maximize book. Where Sandy was the only one who was so certain that I did not have tuberculosis and I was not infectious. She would come into this isolation room without anything on. She just knew, and it was very reassuring to me. But I didn't realize at the time how severe this was until I went back a week, 2 weeks later to what I now had a pulmonologist, which I didn't even know what a pulmonologist was, Rich. And he showed me the pictures and he said, because you're in pretty good shape, because you're 48 years old. And remember now, this is 10 years ago, everybody. I was 48 at the time. He said, you survived this. A lot of people do not survive this severe of an illness. And I was shocked. I mean, I was shaken to the core where it's like, you've been blessed to go out and continue to do what you're doing. And it completely gave me my flip side to my life. And it's what catapulted me forward.
So I can help you sort of, and because I see stories as a filmmaker does, plot points.
Yep.
And you can actually pinpoint some really interesting plot points, especially around this idea of what people say consistently about the journey of souls, is that we choose our lifetime, that we choose the people we're going to incarnate with. They agree to participate and to play roles. And the people who are very significant in our lives, like wives or kids, have actually argued to participate. Now, it doesn't mean that while we're here, we get along with everybody. We don't. But when you examine while you're under hypnosis, this life planning choice, you can see the seeds of how you wound up meeting a person. And what I do is I ask people this question, which I'm going to ask you, is when did you first know that Sandy was the person for you?
When we dated in high school and then we reconnected, we got back together 25 years later. So I knew that I loved her in high school. And
so go back to the moment you first recognized her or saw that you were in love with her.
When I first saw her in high school, I knew that she was just the one. I mean, and it was...
All right, hold on. So where were you? Were you in a class? Were you outside?
No, I was in a hallway of
Okay.
Everett High School, and because she's...
So you're in the hallway.
Yep.
We're going to go to present tense. You're in the hallway. You're walking along. Are you walking or standing?
I believe I would be walking.
Okay, and so now, is she with friends or by herself?
No, she was with friends.
All right, so I want you to freeze frame that moment. Just freeze it.
Okay.
And look at her, and now see her as a photograph. Move the photograph closer to you so you can really look at her. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what is it about her that seems familiar or that you would know she was the one? When somebody says, I knew she was the one, that's past tense. How could you know if you're just meeting or seeing them for the first time? Unless you've met them or seen them before. What's the emotion when you see her?
Wow, that's an interesting question. It was just that feeling of love that this person is he's so approachable. It's like you want to get to know this person.
Okay, very good. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm kind of slicing this up for you. So when you say a feeling of love, what does that mean? What does that mean, love? Because of course you haven't met her yet. Sharing, okay. You haven't met her yet, you see. So it's when you have a feeling of love towards something you've never met. I mean, it's not like looking at a Burger King commercial, right?
Right.
That's something else. But this is somebody you've never met and yet having a feeling that's universal, love. That feeling of love, you see? When do you think she would say was the first time she recognized you as somebody she wanted in her life? Was it then or 25 years later?
No, it was later. It was after because...
Okay. That's all right.
Yep. No,
once we're outside of time, we don't see these things in terms of... I know. We have to... Sometimes in a life planning session, we'll say, I'm going to meet you in high school, but then I'm going to go off and screw around for 25 years until I get back to you. Is that okay? And then she goes, okay, because you work these things out before you get here. I know it sounds weird or counterintuitive, but it's what the research shows consistently. So when you examine now the 25 years later, when she finally realizes, oh, he's not the jerk I thought he was or whatever, he's the one for me. She also had to go through 25 years of experience and life and journey and path, right?
Right.
And now she sees you for who you really are, which is this person who she had planned to be with before she even came here. So I'm just saying, I know what I'm saying sounds odd, but I've been asking people this question for maybe a dozen years now. Like, when was the first conscious thought that you had? No, my sister-in-law said, I still don't know. I know I have 5 kids with him. I still don't. I was like, yeah, that's funny. She said, no, it was the second date. Something in his voice and something in his eyes made me feel like I was home. And then I asked him the question. He said, well, I saw her in a classroom. I looked over and I said, oh, there's my wife. He had never met her before, but knew in that moment, there she is. There's your wife. People listening in are nodding their heads right now.
I can add to that story, and I got to take us to break here, Rich. So I'm gonna take us through to break here. But I just remembered actually when she told me she knew, and I'm going to share that with you when we come back from break, everybody. And when we come back from break, we're going to give you all of Rich's information because we'll be in segment 4 for the Michigan Talk Network. So we'll be right back. Rich Martini's our guest. Flipside, the story of Rich Martini. I told you guys. I told you. This is going to be a really interesting, cool show. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, this is Tom Matt, host of Boomers Rock Radio Talk Show, and this is today's Middle Living Minute. The Daily Fitness Habit of Success by Boomers Rock bonus lesson. Pull it all together into a daily fitness habit. We at Boomers Rock want to support you in your quest to improve your life. The Daily Fitness Habit Lessons is an important foundation for improving your life, but it's just one part of a complicated system we call modern living. But if you can figure out one aspect, the lessons you are doing will help you along in other areas of your life. Once fitness is improving, you can make sure you're getting enough sleep, eating right, working in the right positive mental attitude. We can get you there. Further out, you can work on your career, encore career, and finances. The Boomers Rock Radio Talk Show with me, Tom Matt, are available weekly as our podcast. We look forward to serving you in any capacity that we can. Please reach out to me, tom@boomersrock.us. Peace. Welcome back to the Boomers Rock Radio Talk Show. I'm your host, Tom Matt. Our guest today is Mr. Rich Martini, joining us from Los Angeles. So happy he took some time to give us an hour to talk about all of these interesting topics when you start talking about spirituality and you start talking about spooky science up close and at a distance, you got to feel, again, the compelling feeling that, do you want to know? Because if you don't want to know, that's fine. As Rich is saying, you don't want to know. Rich, I want to continue the story with Sandy and I, if that's okay with you. Is that cool?
Please, yeah. I'm dying to hear it.
I was thinking about what Rich had asked me in the previous segment, everybody, if you're just joining us, that talking about when Sandy and I got together, when Sandy told me she knew I was the one, and I couldn't remember. It was 25 years later, but we had a blizzard here in the Lansing area, and she lived on a cul-de-sac. She was a single mom with a 4-year-old daughter, and she was stuck because Lansing didn't plow her road or her cul-de-sac, and she could not get out of her driveway, and so you could get up and down the street right by her road, but you couldn't get down her cul-de-sac. So you were housebound. You could not get out. And anybody who's been through a blizzard knows what I'm talking about. You just get stuck. If you try to go, you're going to get stuck. So I decided that I had my beater car that I was going to get her to work because she's a healthcare professional and she has to get to the laboratory to work. So I went over and picked her up for work, and I didn't even think anything of it. I just thought that was just, hey, what would just a regular guy do? And she told me later on that really meant so much to her that it was the time that she knew because no one else had ever done anything so nice. And I really didn't think it was that big a deal. So that was the story there. Was I did that for 3 days because they didn't plow her street for 3 days. So every morning, dark, like 5:30 in the morning because she has to be to work at 6 at the laboratory. I went over to her house, picked her up, picked up her daughter, and took her to work and took her daughter to childcare. So that's was great. The moment, Rich. That was the story. I didn't think of it until you said that, but that was it. That was it.
So, and if you want to ask Sandy this question, think about the emotion of that thought, which is, oh, he's really gone outside himself, or there's something about this guy that I feel like I've known forever. And we all have had that experience. We call it, deja vu sometimes, where you meet somebody, you shake their hand. This happened to me. I was in London. A friend of mine got me over there to pitch a TV show. And so we were pitching the show, and it didn't go anywhere. But while I was there, I shook the hand of this professor from Oxford. And as I shook his hand, some voice in my head said, "This is why you're here." So I shook his hand, and I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. Let's exchange emails." I mean, I'm supposed to know this guy. So we wrote to each other for about 6 months, and his daughter suddenly died. And he wrote me this email, and I had been reading about children's past lives. Carol Bowman wrote a book, and a fascinating topic. And so I sent him a copy of that, and he sent me a copy of Michael Newton's book, Journey of Souls. I had never heard of him. So ultimately, I started this documentary. And then I wrote to him and I said, hey, I did a session. Michael Newton had somebody do a session with me, and I saw not only a previous lifetime, but I saw this between lives. Everything that was in his work happened to me. I was startled. And so he organized a session in London with a Michael Newton trained hypnotherapist, newtoninstitute.org. And he saw a previous lifetime where he lived in Boston in the 1840s. Boston, a city he'd never been to. But he saw this woman in this past life memory, somebody he had dated in the 1960s, briefly, but there she was as his wife in the 1960s and the love of his life, like his soulmate. So afterwards, he told me about this, and I said, are you still friends with her? He said, yeah, I am. I said, all right, well, let's try an experiment. So I found a hypnotherapist in New York City who never heard of her or him, didn't hear the story. She didn't know the story. He didn't tell her. She went down to New York and had the identical past life memory, being married to this guy in 1840. He was a banker in Boston. The odds of that being, whatever, are infant, they're a lot.
Right.
So my point is when you feel like you've known someone forever, there's a good chance that you have.
That is so interesting. I just love this stuff, man. Oh, what? I was just thinking as I'm listening to this, and our guest today, everybody, Rich Martini is joining us. Flipside, the story of Rich Martini. You got to read these books and check this stuff. If you're compelled to do it, are you compelled to do this? Great, as Rich was telling us. Tell me why it was that a few weeks ago, I wake up and I hear your voice at 4:30 in the morning of all times on this radio program, on George Norrie's radio program. And it's like, I only listen to it for maybe 10 minutes because I get up.
Well, let me tell you why you heard my voice. And this doesn't come from me. I continued my research. So Hacking the Afterlife, I expanded it from near-death events, right? People talking about near-death experiences, between life experiences, to mediums who claimed, and I picked the ones that I knew were really good at what they did, claimed to be able to communicate with people no longer here. The theory being, if it's true what everybody's saying under hypnosis or, during a near-death event that our souls go somewhere, why couldn't we talk to them? So that was what I was trying to do. It's almost like paper cups with a string between it. You remember Dixie cups? You'd try to communicate. So that's what a medium does. If you go to see a medium because you're interested in how your love life's going to be or predicting the future, I've got news for you. They can't predict the future because it's not set. I know that's controversial. I mean, it's not really controversial, but I'm just telling you, this is what my research has shown. They can give you a likely outcome or predict a possible outcome, but so can flipping a coin. So my point is, I use mediums for something completely different than love life or, what's the future. I ask them to help me communicate with people no longer on the planet, including my friend Luana. And recently, a friend of ours, Harry Dean Stanton, an actor, kind of a famous atheist, passed away. And he came to a meeting that I was having with a medium. He came to the meeting, spoke to Luana, and the two of them gave me a lecture about what it was like in the afterlife. I posted it at richmartini.com. There's two posts under Harry Dean Stanton's name. The point is, Harry said this: tell people there is an afterlife. Further, tell them to believe there's an afterlife. And I said, Harry, come on, you're a famous atheist. Do you think anyone's going to believe what I'm telling them? And he said, tell them to believe in the possibility of an afterlife, because I wasted a whole bunch of my life thinking there wasn't one. And now that I'm here, I realize what a waste of time that was. Just offering that there is a possibility allows you to stop, as he called it, being on the treadmill of doubt, where you just spend your life doubting, like, is this worth what's happening, or why am I doing this? All I can tell you is I've filmed 45 of these sessions, and every time people get to talk to their counsel and ask, so how am I doing? They go, you're doing exactly what you signed up for. You're doing exactly what you set out to do. You should give yourself more credit for getting this far. Not everybody does. So how about that?
I love it. This is so interesting to me. Rich Martini is our guest. Rich, we've got about 2 minutes before we got to wrap the Michigan Talk Network broadcast segment, and then we'll go to the fifth segment here for WKAR. Okay. What would you like to close with in the last minute and a half so we can wrap this thing? We'll come back in the fifth segment. And everybody, I know you want to listen to the fifth segment, so you can go get this on the podcast or on iTunes or on WKAR.
Well, people do ask me, do you have anything, any one sentence that could really help me in my lifetime? And I ask that question. So I've got a couple of one sentences that we can talk about. They're just things that while I was under deep hypnosis talking to what appeared to me to be my counsel, I was able to ask them questions like, well, what can I tell people that will help them with their lives? And they gave them to me. But further, my next book, which I'm writing right now, working on it, I think I'm going to call it Talking to the Flipside, but basically I'm interviewing people fully conscious, people who are not under hypnosis whatsoever, having a coffee. But there are people who've had near-death experiences, or some are like you did. You have an epiphany somewhere in your life, or a dream, some profound dream. What I do is I walk into the dream with them, like I did with the memory of you and of Sandy.
Yep.
Right? Present tense. And I start asking, is there anybody around this event, anybody else? And we start talking to their guides. It's mind-boggling because they say the same things that people say under deep hypnosis, but they're fully conscious. They talk about past lives. They talk about their guides. They talk about why they chose this lifetime. All I can say is I posted some of those up at Martini Prods on YouTube. You can watch yourself. I don't know what I'm going to ask people, and they come on stage, and I say, so, tell me about your dream. And within a few minutes, we're interviewing their council members who are telling me and them why they're guiding this person through their life and what they've accomplished, et cetera, et cetera.
So awesome. All right, so we're going to break, and we're going to stop the Michigan Talk Network broadcast. And again, everybody, I apologize, but this is the thing. When you go on to PBS, we have another 12 minutes on the bonus segment, but you can get the bonus segment on the podcast, so that's the cool thing. Rich Martini's been our guest today. Flipside, the story of Rich Martini plus. If our show fits your business or group's mission, you want to be of service to you through our guests, hit me back, Tom at boomersrock.us. Always remember, before you can share love with others, you must love yourself first. I want to thank Rich Martini for being with us, Ezra Baker, Mickey Haddock, Sandy Matt, Craig Stiles. We'll talk to everybody on the Michigan Talk Network next weekend. We'll be right back with the fifth segment on WKAR and the podcast. Now, everybody else, go out and ignite your life. Good day now. Welcome back to the Boomers Rock Radio Talk Show, the exclusive fifth segment for WKAR and PBS, whatever other PBS stations are going to pick us up. Because you know what? It's all cool, and we get to do 52 minutes of talk radio, which makes it super, super, super cool. So Rich Martini is our guest. Flipside, the story of Rich Martini. We have covered so much ground here, but there's something that I'd like to talk about. And if you go to Rich's YouTube channel, you can see this video that he has up there. And I made a note of this because I was hoping I could get to this and ask Rich if it was okay to talk to him about when his dad passed and he had a conversation with his dad, or his dad had a conversation with him. Rich, would you please share that story? Because I found that to be so darn interesting, and the whole thing, talking to your mom, please.
Well, honestly, it was very strange because this was prior to my research. Let's put it that way. And, my whole life, I might have had a glimpse of somebody that wasn't there, but nothing sort of dramatic.
So you were sort of a pseudo-skeptic at that point.
Oh, yeah. No, I've always been. Jaded Hollywood guy.
Hollywood guy. There you go.
Yeah. But in this case, so my dad had passed away that morning, and I flew back home to Northbrook. And that night, while I was sleeping, I felt his hand on my shoulder wake me up. And everybody knows what the hand of their father feels like on their shoulder, but I felt it was him. And before I was conscious, I was saying, Dad, and I heard him say, I'm experiencing indescribable joy. Now, it's not a sentence I had ever heard him say before, so I was kind of skeptic even about that. And he said, I need you to write something down. And I thought to myself, am I making this up? You know, I'm hearing his voice in my left ear. It's a little bit behind my head. And I said, okay, all right. So I turned the light on. I got a pencil and a piece of paper. I'm fully awake. But then I thought, I'll turn the light off. Maybe that's hard for him. Maybe that interrupts him. But he said, I'm here with your mom, and I'm here with my mom and dad, with mom and papa, and I'm here with my brother and sister and all these other people that I knew and loved, you know, relatives. And he wanted to hit a message from my mom, you know, tell her I love her, and et cetera, et cetera. And he said, also tell her I'm with, and then he named like 6 people whose names I'd never heard before, but I wrote them all down. Then he had specific messages for each one of my brothers. Now, by the way, the next morning I get up, I'm over coffee, I'm saying, now listen, I had this dream where Dad spoke to me, and he told me to tell you this. And they all said, oh, you know, you talk about sideways glances. Like, oh, shut up, you know. They just didn't want to hear it, but they were very tailored to each individual. So, you know, I wrote them down, I gave them to him. I said to my mom, so, Mom, did you ever hear him say something like indescribable joy? She said, once he talked about something that was so beautiful it was indescribable. I said, okay, so that's specific. I said, what about these names, these 6 people? She said, oh, those are friends of ours who died in World War II. None of those names I was aware of, I had ever heard before. Couldn't be me, you know, having heard it. These are people that he knows. You see, it's new information, something that I wasn't aware of that he's telling me from the other side. So since then, I've had a couple of experiences where he's shown up. I had a minor thing at a doctor's office where they put me under, and I was sitting with him like at a river in the grass and laughing, and we were telling stories. And he was about 40, you know, younger than I sort of knew him. And then I heard the sounds of the doctor's office as they were, you know, taking me off the drug. And I said, oh, that's my cue. I got to go. And he said, see you later. So I've had that experience, you know, more than once. But aside from that, I did tease your audience with a couple of phrases. Should we talk about them?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, wherever you want to go with this, because you know I'm setting you up for the next return visit, so that's fine.
Yeah. But I didn't want to be a total tease. But the 2 things I wanted to impart, one is during my session that I had, I was there in front of a council of people, you know, talking to me. As weird as that sounds, but I could see them. And I said, is there any one thing that I can say to people to bring back that will be helpful? And there was a pause, and then I heard, just let go. And I realized it meant let go of anger, let go of sadness, let go of whatever those emotions are that hold you back from who you're supposed to be or what you're supposed to do. Just let that go. You feel like we spend a lot of our time feeling like people have wronged us or we didn't get the thing that we were supposed to get or whatever that is. And the answer is just let it go. Just let go. I thought, that's fascinating.
How liberating has this been for you, Rich?
Well, you know, very much so. I mean, listen, you know, now I don't dismiss my dreams. Like you, I don't have a notepad. I write stuff down. Actually, the notepad that you have that you mentioned.
Yes.
I heard somebody speaking to me, and this is before I started this research. I heard someone speaking to me in Latin, okay? And I wrote down what they said, vanum populatum. I was like, what? You know, and then I found it, you know, on the notepad like a month later. Like, what's that? I looked it up. Oh, it's a Latin phrase. Vanum, it means vanity. I don't speak Latin. Populatum, it means to annihilate completely, to utterly destroy, to wipe off the face of the earth. And I was like, oh my God, who's telling me to annihilate vanity? I live in LA. Where do I begin? But 6 months later, I started this documentary, and they said, now, Rich, would you like to try a session? And I thought, I can't. Then I can't be objective. But then I thought, what am I saying? You know, I can prove this is fake because I am not going to go into a previous lifetime because I don't believe there can be one. And if I don't see anything, I won't be led there, you see? But they said, you know, come up with some questions you might want to ask. So that was my trick question. What's the meaning of Annum Populatum? I know that nobody on the planet until now knows what it means, right?
Right.
So when I asked the question, they laughed. My counsel laughed, and they said, you should ask Richard the answer to that. And as he said that, there was an image of me lying on the couch, and I realized two things. One, he was referring to me, the guy he was talking to, as my higher self. Because he could have said, you know the answer to that. He said you should ask Richard the answer for that, and he showed me an image of my temporary self, the guy that I am now. You see?
Yep.
And the second thing is I realized my higher self, had given that temporary self that puzzle, knowing that he would look it up, he would think about it, and realize what it means, which is everything, fame, money, success, all of it's vanity, all of it's just icing on a cake. None of it has to do with reality. All of it has to do with ego. All of it has to do with vanity. And if you annihilate it, you'll have a truer sense of what the planet is and what we're doing on it. Wow. So, yes, that was a profound rethink. But the second sentence that was most profound to me was, I was filming a session, friend of mine, skeptic, didn't think she'd get anywhere. So her question that she asked was, what or who is God? And when she got to a point where she was talking to her spirit, counselor, she asked him, what or who is God? He laughed. He said, oh, you humans, you think, answering this stuff is going to help you figure it out. Let me tell you, God's beyond the capacity of the human brain to comprehend. You just can't physically understand it. I go, wow, that's an answer. He said, however, you can experience God by opening your heart to everyone and to all things. And when you think about what that means, that we go back to that word of unconditional love. Opening your heart to everyone is the definition of unconditional love. Sometimes you see it in parents. Sometimes you see it with people and their pets. Sometimes you see it with identical twins. You talked about the science of quantum entanglement. You briefly mentioned that.
Yep.
I think that's what twins are. They're, when you meet when two people have already agreed to meet in this lifetime, they run into each other, that's kind of quantum entanglement, isn't it?
Yes.
Two ions that have been created in the same space now run into each other. They know each other. So, identical twins have phantom pains wherever they are on the planet, because the other one got hurt. I think that's a physical manifestation of quantum entanglement. I mean, look, how's that for a little science for you? But ultimately, what I'm saying is, if you can open your heart to everyone and to all things, wow, trees, tables, they all exist for a reason. Insects, they're all here for a reason, and we have to understand that reason why they're here. And if you open your heart to the planet, doesn't it make sense you would no longer pollute the water, the air, or the earth? If your heart is open to it, wouldn't you want to come back here, to enjoy the forests of Michigan or the forests of Wisconsin? To see sunsets again? I mean, that's the definition of opening your heart to everyone and all things. I mean, I think that's pretty profound. It's not that God is love, like the bumper sticker says, but love, the thing, that unconditional love thing, that's what God is. That's the medium of this energy, consciousness, God.
Subconscious, and the subconscious and conscious beliefs and the things that we go through in our lives, we don't even scratch the surface of how deep our subconscious can go. Rich Martini's been our guest. Rich, I've got a minute to go before I've got to break the show. What would you like to close this fifth segment with for the listeners in the mid-Michigan area and then everyone else who's listening to the podcast?
Lottery numbers. The next time I'll tell you, I was interviewing Michael Newton on the Flipside. He passed away a few months ago, and my friend and I were talking to him. He showed up. And I said, so, Michael, how do we communicate with our loved ones? He said, say their name. I said, aloud or in your head? He said, doesn't matter. I said, so how do we know we're not making up what they're saying to us? He said, when they answer the question you ask before you can form the question, then you'll know you've made a connection. So you want to talk to your loved ones on the flip side? Do that. Say their name. Ask them questions that preferably you don't know the answer to. And when they answer the question before you can even get to the question, you'll know you're talking to your loved one.
Wow. And that is a wrap. Rich Martini's been our guest, everybody, joining us from Los Angeles. If you didn't enjoy this show, well, so sorry, but I did. I mean, I thought it was fantastic, and I am definitely gonna ask Rich to come back because this is such a profound topic and so much fun. Love your energy. Thank you so much, Rich, for being with us.
Thanks, Tom. You rock.
Thanks, buddy. Always remember, before you can share love with others, you must love yourself first. I think that's what Rich was saying throughout the show. Are you compelled? All right?
True.
Thanks again to Rich Martini, Ezra Baker, Mickey Haddock, Sandy Mack.